They said the barbarian queen did not rule by fear. She ruled by memory. The memory of what she did the first time someone betrayed her. The elders still whisper that night was so cold the stars themselves retreated, as if even the sky refused to witness what she would become. In the flicker of torchlight, in the deep forest beyond the border of the empire, Queen Brynhild carved her name into history not with ink, but with the screams of the man who thought he could defy her. What happened in that ceremony would twist the spine of history so violently that later chroniclers refused to record it. To speak of it was treason. To write it down was death. And yet, the myth survived, not because the people wanted it to, but because they could not forget. For before she was a queen, Brynhild was a wife. Before she was a terror, she was a protector. Before she was a legend, she was betrayed. And betrayal, in her world, was not simply a crime. It was a curse, a rot that could reach the roots of a kingdom, if not cut away with fire. The story begins not with her coronation, but with the day she discovered that the man she had trusted most, the war chief Arleth, had struck a secret pact with the Empire of Vastrum. The Empire had long desired the iron-rich hills of her people, the Ravener, and Arleth, hungry for titles and tired of being overshadowed by a woman, had delivered them a map of every hidden pass, every winter shelter, every weak point in the Ravener defenses. But what he did not know was this. Brynhild had been watching him for weeks, ever since the night she tasted something wrong in the air, something sour, dishonorable, like a knife without a hilt. She saw the signs, the sudden wealth, the secret meetings, the coded messages carried by pale-faced riders at dusk. And so, when the Empire's envoys met Arla deep in the woods, believing themselves unseen, they were surrounded by Brynhild's elite. The Shield Daughters, warriors sworn to Queen until their last breath. The envoys surrendered instantly. Arleth did not. He reached for his blade, but Brynhild stepped forward before he could draw it. "You would bleed for them?" she asked, her voice calm as frozen water. "No," he spat. "I would bleed for myself." She nodded. "Good. Then you may begin." He never understood the meaning of those words until the ceremony itself began, because Brynhild did not believe in execution. Execution was a punishment for simple criminals. Betrayal required something far older, far darker, and far more symbolic. That night, she summoned the full council of elders and the entire warrior host. The Ravener were not a people of law. They were a people of memory. And to them, punishment was not carried out to end a crime, but to brand it into the bones of society so it would never happen again. In the center of the sacred clearing, an ancient tree the color of dead embers rose like a spine from the earth. Its branches were shaped by centuries of ritual, twisted and curved like skeletal arms. The Ravener called it the Witness, for it was said to remember every oath ever spoken beneath it, and every oath ever broken. Arleth, bound by cords of woven iron, was dragged before it. The Shield Daughters forced him to his knees as Brynhild stepped into the clearing wearing the ceremonial mantle woven with raven feathers. Her eyes did not shine with rage. Rage was too small for what she felt. "This is not for vengeance," she told the crowd. "This is for the kingdom." The people murmured the ancient reply as one. Let the memory be carved. Torches were planted in a perfect circle, their flames quivering like the breath of unseen spirits. Each flame reflected in Brynhild's eyes as if feeding her resolve. She raised her arm, and the ritual began. The first step of the ceremony was the unveiling of the Oath Stone, a black slab carved with the names of every Ravener who had ever died defending the clan. 2 Shield Daughters brought it forward, and the elders bowed. It was said the stone grew heavier with every betrayal it bore witness to. Arleth screamed as they pressed his forehead to its surface, the cold biting into his skin like a winter spear. "You gave our paths to our enemies," Brynhild said. "You sold your own blood. So now, the stone will take something from you." She lifted a ceremonial knife made not of metal, but of obsidian, the sacred material of her people, believed to cut not only flesh but truth itself. Arleth tried to jerk away, but the Shield Daughters held him fast. "This cut," Brynhild said softly, "severs you from us." With a quick, deliberate stroke, she sliced across his cheek, marking him with a line of severance, the cut given only to traitors whose names would never again be spoken among the living. Blood dripped onto the oath stone, sizzling as though the stone drank it. The crowd did not cheer. The Ravener never cheered during punishment. They listened, but this was only the beginning. The second step was the offering of shadows. A brazier was lit at the base of the witness tree, its flames turning black as herbs were thrown into it. Smoke rose, thick and twisting, forming shapes that looked almost human. "Your shadow belongs to the Empire now," Brynhild said to Arleth. "So we strip it from you." The shield daughters turned Arleth to face the fire, forcing his eyes open. The smoke swirled around him, clinging to his body like spectral fingers. He gagged, and the crowd whispered prayers. According to legend, the black smoke revealed the truth of a man's heart, and Arleth's heart was shown to be hollow. The smoke recoiled from him in disgust. A gasp rippled through the clearing. In Ravener lore, to be rejected by the smoke meant one was no longer considered human, merely a shell, a vessel for dishonor. Brynhild spoke again, louder now. "For your betrayal, you lose your place in the world of men. For the next step, you will lose something greater." She stepped forward. Arleth trembled. The final stage, the stage that chroniclers later refused to describe, was a ceremony of unmaking, a ritual passed down from a time before language, before kings, before history itself. It was a ceremony meant to purge betrayal so thoroughly that its stain could never spread. Brynhild raised her obsidian blade again. "Arleth, son of no one, echo of lies," she declared, "you will not die tonight. Your death would be too small." She turned to her people. "Let the ceremony of unmaking begin." The torches flared. The witness tree groaned. And the ritual that would twist her legacy into legend, into terror, finally began. The air shifted as soon as Brynhild uttered the words. Even the flames seemed to pull back, thinning into frail threads, as if frightened by what they were about to witness. The Ravener warriors had seen death in every shape, on frozen battlefields, in burning raids, under collapsing winter cliffs. Yet the ceremony of unmaking was something different. It was not meant to kill. It was meant to erase. A hush fell over the clearing. No child cried. No elder coughed. It was as though the entire tribe had stopped breathing. Arleth knelt at the center of the ritual circle, his chest rising and falling like a cornered animal. The iron cords dug into his arms, cutting through skin. Blood pooled at his elbows. His face was streaked with sweat, dirt, and trembling disbelief. "You cannot do this," he rasped, though his voice broke halfway through. "I was your war chief." Brynhild stepped forward until her shadow fell across him, long and sharp. "You were," she said, "but the man I named war chief died the moment he made a pact with the Empire. You are only the shell he left behind." He shook his head desperately. "The Empire would have crushed us. I did what I had to." "And now," she replied, "so do I." She lifted her hand. A shield daughter struck the ground with a staff carved from volcanic stone. The sound it made reverberated through the forest, low and unearthly, like a beast waking from ages of slumber. The warriors closest to the tree bowed their heads. Brynhild raised the obsidian blade. Unlike metal, it gleamed without reflecting the light, absorbing it completely, as though fed by the darkness around them. "The ceremony of unmaking has 3 trials," she announced. "The trial of name, the trial of flesh, and the trial of echo." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Even for the Ravener, these were old words, older than the witness tree itself. Brynhild knew that by invoking them, by performing all 3, she would etch this moment deeper into their history than any battle victory could. Begin the trial of name. The shield daughters dragged Arleth upright. His legs barely held him. Brynhild opened a scroll that had been placed on a stone pedestal. Ink glimmered under the torchlight. These were the names of the tribe's honored defenders, the men and women who had died without breaking their oaths. There was a blank space at the bottom, a space where Arleth's name should have been added when he died. Instead, Brynhild spoke. "Arleth, I revoke your name. You are no longer the Ravener. You are no longer son to your mother, nor brother to your kin, nor warrior to your tribe. Your name belongs to the dead, but you have abandoned it." She tore the scroll. The sound was soft, but it struck Arleth like a blade. No, no. Brynhild, please. His voice cracked. In their culture, to lose one's name was worse than losing one's life. The name was the bridge between the living and the honored dead. Without it, one could not enter the halls of memory after death. Without it, a soul wandered. Brynhild turned her back on him. Begin the marking. A bowl of soot mixed with ash from the sacred fire was brought forth. Using 2 fingers, Brynhild drew a black line across Arleth's remaining cheek, opposite the cut she had given him. This marks the emptiness where your name once lived, she said. Arleth sagged forward, his breath broken by sobs. But the ceremony was not done with him. Begin the trial of flesh. The witness tree groaned again. Wind swirled in a spiral, lifting fallen leaves from the ground. The shield daughters pressed Arleth back against the ancient trunk, tying him to its gnarled bark with cords of woven iron. The tree was cold, not the cold of winter air, but the cold of something that had watched centuries pass and outlived them all. Elder Saria stepped forward. Her age was unknown. Some said she had seen 6 generations of queens. Her eyes were milky with cataracts, but she walked with purpose. The tree remembers, she intoned. The tree judges. She held up a small urn. Brynhild uncapped it. Inside was a fine black powder, ground charcoal from the ashes of every Ravener warrior who had died honorably in battle over the past 10 years. It was sacred. It was never touched by the unworthy. But tonight was different. Brynhild dipped her fingers into the powder. Arleth thrashed weakly. No, no, please. Hold him, Brynhild ordered. The shield daughters tightened their grip. She pressed her fingers to his chest, smearing the sacred ash across his skin. Not gently. She dragged her hand with deliberate force, leaving dark streaks like claw marks. This, she said, is the flesh you have stained. She dipped her hand again, marking his shoulders. This is the burden you gave others, the burden of defending a tribe you would have sold. She marked his abdomen. This is a hunger you chose. Hunger for power, for titles, for a crown you did not deserve. Finally, she pressed her ash-covered hand to the center of his forehead. And this is the truth of your heart. The ravens that perched in the treetops shrieked as if in answer. Arleth sagged, tears streaking through the black markings. Brynhild, don't do this. I can still fight. I can still serve. Your service ended when you chose yourself over your people, she replied. She turned to the crowd. The trial of flesh is complete. The warriors struck the ground with their spears once, an acknowledgement, not applause. There was only one trial left, the trial of Echo, and this was the one even the Ravener feared. Brynhild approached Arleth slowly. The torches around the clearing flickered violently, as if a sudden wind had swept through, but the air was still. I will give you one chance, she said quietly, not to redeem yourself, that is beyond you, but to face the truth. She held the obsidian blade up to his throat, not touching, just close enough that he could feel its presence. Speak your final echo, she commanded. The last truth you will ever be remembered for. Arleth swallowed. His eyes darted wildly across the faces watching him. People he had once led, once fought beside. People who now stared at him as if he were a corpse that hadn't fallen yet. Finally, he whispered, I wanted what you had. Your respect, your power, your people. His voice twisted into something ugly. They followed you like you were something more than human. But you weren't. You were just a woman who didn't know her place. A low growl rippled through the crowd. Several warriors stepped forward, fists tightening. But Brynhild did not flinch. Good, she said softly. Let that truth echo. She turned to the tree. The final trial begins now. The shield daughters untied Arleth from the tree. His legs nearly collapsed, but they held him upright. Brynhild pointed to the space before the witness. The small, circular patch of earth known as the Hollow, believed to be the place where the first Ravener oath was ever spoken. Arleth was dragged into it. Here, she declared, your echo will be removed. The shield daughters raised their staffs. The air thickened. The torches dimmed. The forest seemed to lean in. And as the ritual reached its climax, as the first strike of the staffs fell, Arleth screamed tore through the clearing, raw, primal, filled with terror no battle had ever given him. The ceremony of unmaking had begun its final work, and when it was done, Arleth would still live, but he would never truly exist again. The first crack of the staffs echoed like thunder trapped beneath the earth. Birds scattered from the trees, and the torches wavered as though the flames had shrunk in fear. Arleth's scream stretched into the night, rising and falling like a wounded animal, until it became almost inhuman, raw enough to scrape the silence itself. The staff struck the ground in perfect rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 4. The shield daughters did not look at Arleth as they struck, for their eyes were fixed on Brynhild. She alone commanded the beat of the ritual, and with a single movement of her hand she could stop it, speed it, or change its course. But she did none of these things. She let the rhythm build. 5, 6, 7. With every strike of the staffs, the earth beneath Arleth's feet shuddered. He could feel it vibrating through his bones, rattling his teeth, sinking into the space where his name, once carved with pride, now felt like an empty pit. His breath came in jagged bursts. His eyes darted wildly from one staff to another. Stop, please, I can't. But the shield daughters neither slowed nor hesitated. The ceremony of unmaking was older than mercy, older than tears, older than the trembling shape of a man who no longer knew where he belonged. Brynhild stood just at the edge of the hollow, her face carved into calm stone. But inside her chest, a storm crackled. She could feel the weight of what she was doing. Not simply punishing a traitor, but sealing the destiny of her tribe. She had once trusted Arleth more than any other warrior, and it was that memory, sharp as any obsidian blade, that kept her hand steady. Let him fall, she said. The staff struck in unison. The ground beneath Arleth's feet split. The hollow was not a hole in the earth. It was a place where the world was thin, a place where echoes gathered, a place where the ancestors whispered, and where the truth of one's soul could be stripped like bark from a tree. Arleth collapsed as though the earth had ripped something out of him. He clutched his chest, gasping, but there was no wound to hold. Something deeper had been taken. He reached for the air, fingers trembling violently. "What did you do?" he choked. Brynhild approached him, her voice steady. "The trial of echo takes only what you offer. But His words died in his throat. He searched his mind for something familiar, something that should have been there, his own voice inside his own head, the steady reassurance, the small whisper that told a man who he was, except it wasn't there. He felt empty, not metaphorically, literally empty. The shield daughters stepped back, their staffs lowered. The torches snapped with sudden heat, as if reclaiming the space around them. Brynhild watched Arleth as he struggled to understand, to breathe normally, to exist in a body that no longer held its center. "What you spoke," she said slowly, "won't echo anymore. You gave your truth, and the ritual removed it. I don't understand." His voice shook like a broken reed. "Then listen." Brynhild motioned with her hand. The warriors around a clearing murmured, the low, constant murmur that usually swelled when the tribe gathered in council. But this time there was no swell, no shift, no resonance. Arleth's confession, his last truth, was gone, taken, dissolved into the earth. He searched the faces around him for recognition, for judgment, for hatred, anything, but he found nothing. Even those who despised him could no longer hear the echo of his words in their minds. It had been wiped from memory, sucked out of the world as if it had never been spoken. He was still alive, but his truth was dead. The ceremony of unmaking had done its work. Arleth collapsed onto his knees, shaking uncontrollably. "I don't know who I am," he whispered. "Good," Brynhild said, "because you no longer have the right to." A ripple ran to the crowd. Fear, admiration, horror, pride. Because while the Ravener had always punished betrayal, they had never witnessed the full measure of this ancient ritual. Brynhild had revived something many believed was too dark, too dangerous, too powerful to belong to any queen. Elder Saria stepped beside her. "Queen Brynhild," she said, her voice brittle with age but strong with authority. "The ceremony is complete. The traitor's name, flesh, and echo have been stripped. His shadow is severed. His heart is hollow. His truth is gone. Arleth looked up at them, tears running through the soot smeared across his face. What happens to me now? Brynhild turned to him, the obsidian blade still in her hand, though she did not raise it. You will live, she said. You will walk among the tribe as you did before. But no one will speak your name. No one will look at you as kin. No one will answer your voice. You will be present but unacknowledged. She leaned closer. You will be forgotten while still breathing. Arleth let out a broken sob. That's worse than death. Yes, she whispered. That is why it was chosen. The shield daughters released him, and the warriors turned away. Every single one. Arleth gasped, because the silence that followed was not empty. It was crushing. Silence from every direction. Silence dense enough to suffocate. Face the truth, Brynhild said softly. The world around you no longer hears you. Your betrayal removed your place among us. Walk or fall. It is no longer my concern. Arleth tried to stand, but his legs gave out. His breath hitched in panicked sobs. He crawled toward the nearest warrior, Esvald, one of the men he had once commanded. Esvald! Please, please talk to me. You know me. You know I fought beside you. Esvald stared ahead, expression blank, refusing to acknowledge the figure crawling in the dirt beside him. Another warrior shifted away from Arleth's touch. A shield daughter turned her back. A young apprentice who once idolized Arleth didn't even look up as he passed. No, no, no. Arleth clawed at the earth. Why won't anyone look at me? Brynhild answered him without turning. Because to them, you are already a ghost. Arleth froze. The word hit him harder than the staffs had. Ghost. He looked down at his trembling hands. His fingers were curled like claws. Black ash was embedded under his nails. His chest ached, but not from any physical cut. He felt missing, incomplete. The hollow beneath his feet felt colder than before, as though the earth itself rejected him. Brynhild stepped forward again, her voice carrying across the clearing. Let this night be remembered, she declared, not for its cruelty, but for its purpose. Betrayal tears the tribe from within. Tonight we have cut away the rot. The people murmured the ancient response. Let the memory be carved. Brynhild raised her hand. The torches extinguished in unison, plunging the clearing into near darkness. Arleth let out one final cry. Brynhild, please, I still exist. Her voice drifted back to him through the darkness like winter wind. Yes, she said, but no longer among us. Then she walked away. The tribe followed, and Arleth, shaking, sobbing, alone, remained kneeling in the cold dirt of the hollow. For the first time in his life, he understood the true meaning of loneliness. Not solitude, not exile, but the slow, crushing terror of still being alive in a world where no one saw him. A living ghost, a man erased, and as the last torchlight vanished from the clearing, a new shadow began to grow in the forest, dark, patient, waiting. Because the ceremony of unmaking had consequences. Consequences no queen, not even Brynhild, could fully control. For 3 days after the ceremony of unmaking, the tribe behaved as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. Warriors sharpened blades and repaired armor. The shield daughters drilled in the frost-hardened fields. Hunters followed tracks through the dense pine forests. Children ran laughing among the tents. Smoke curled upward from the cooking fires. Life continued, except for Arleth. He wandered the camp like a shadow would wait, a ghost trapped in living flesh. He tried to speak to anyone at all, but each time the result was the same. Warriors stepped aside without looking at him. Mothers shielded their children's eyes. Apprentices who once followed him with wide admiration now stared straight through him, as though he were air. He wasn't ignored. He was unseen. The unmaking had done more than strip his echo. It had carved a hole around him. Even if someone brushed past him, their minds slid away, unable to hold the shape of him. Arleth slept on the cold ground, shivering and covered in leaves. No one offered him shelter. When he approached the food fires, warriors turned their bodies just enough to block his way. Not aggressively, just instinctively, as though his presence pushed him to shift without conscious thought. when he tried to take bread after everyone else had eaten. His fingers trembled so violently that most of it fell to the dirt. He was starving. He was exhausted. He was beginning to unravel. The worst part was not the hunger, not the cold, not even the loneliness. It was the silence, without an echo inside his own mind. Arleth couldn't remember what he sounded like. He spoke, but the words felt foreign, wrongly shaped, hollow, as though someone else were moving his mouth. Sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, he forgot his own face. On the fourth morning, he left the camp. Not by choice. His legs simply carried him, as though his mind had lost the ability to command them. He stumbled into the forest, half blind with cold and exhaustion. Snow dusted the needles of the pine trees, glittering like 1,000 watchful eyes. At first, he heard nothing but his own ragged breathing. Then he heard the whisper, not loud, not clear, but unmistakably there. Arleth, he froze, breath catching. No one had spoken his name since the ceremony. He spun around. Who's there? Silence. His heart hammered against his ribs. He took a step forward, branches snapping underfoot. The whisper came again. Closer. Lower. Arleth. It sounded like distant breath moving through hollow wood. He followed it without thinking, branches scratching his arms, cold air burning his lungs. His feet stumbled over roots. His legs shook. Then he saw it. At the edge of a ravine, half buried beneath twisted roots, stood a figure. Tall, thin, wrapped in tattered cloaks. It did not move when he approached. It did not look up. Its head was bowed, and its hands clutched something dark and long and wrapped in leather. Arleth swallowed, fear coiling in his gut. Are you calling me? The figure lifted its head. Its face was not a face at all. The skin had peeled away long ago, leaving a skull with strands of sinew and patches of withered flesh clinging to bone. The eye sockets were empty, yet Arleth felt it staring at him. His breath fled his chest. He stumbled back, but his feet refused to run. The skull's jaw creaked open, and from it, layered, thick, echoing from somewhere deeper than breath, came the whisper. Arleth, it stepped forward. The snow did not crunch under its feet. The air did not shift around it. The ravine wind passed through its ribs like mist. Arleth tried to speak, but only a strangled gasp left his throat. The figure tilted its head. Then, slowly, it held out the object in its hands. It was a weapon, but not any weapon made by ravener hands. A staff of bone carved with spiraling runes. A blade of black stone fused into its end, not obsidian, but something older, denser, as though born from the pressure at the heart of mountains. For a moment, he could only stare. The figure spoke again, this time more clearly. You were unmade. Arleth's blood froze. The figure stepped closer, snow drifting through its hollow rib cage. But unmaking does not erase. It reveals. What does that mean? Arleth whispered. What are you? The skull tilted again, slow and deliberate. I am one who was unmade before you. Arleth's heart lurched. Someone else? Someone else had endured what he now suffered? The figure extended the staff until its tip touched the ground between them. The tribe believes unmaking end a man. Arleth's breathing quickened. But it does not, the figure said. Its voice rasped like wind scraping stone. It changes him, opens him, carves him into something hollow. Yes, but hollowness can be filled. Arleth shook his head violently. I don't want this. I want my name, my place, my life back. The skull face leaned closer. Names are chains. Arleth stumbled back. Echoes are cages. The whisper sank into his skin like cold needles. You feel it, the figure said. Don't you? A space inside you that hurts because it is empty. A place where identity once lived. Arleth clutched his chest, nails digging into his skin. It was true. The emptiness was real. A hollow inside him deeper than bone, deeper than heart. The figure nodded. It is waiting. For what? Arleth whispered. The skull raised the staff, its runes glowing faintly like embers. For a purpose. Arleth staggered back again, shaking. You want me to use that? I want you to survive. the figure replied. Unmade men do not last long unless they transform. You will fade, dissolve into forgetfulness, die in silence. Arleth's throat tightened. Unless, the figure continued, you claim the void as power. Arleth stared at the staff. Its runes pulsed. A deep vibration hummed through the ground. A hunger rose inside him, terrifying, cold, but irresistible. The figure took one final step closer, until its hollow sockets were inches from Arleth's face. Take it. Arleth reached out instinctively, but then pulled his hand back. No, this is wrong. The figure did not blink, could not blink. Then you will die forgotten. The words hit him harder than a hammer. He saw, suddenly, the future ahead of him. He would wither alone, starving in the forest. He would collapse in the snow. No one would bury him. No one would carve his stone. No one would whisper his story in the long winter nights. He would simply disappear. A life erased. His breath came in sharp sobs. I don't want to vanish. The figure extended the staff again. The runes brightened. Snow lifted in spirals around them, as though the world held its breath. Arleth hesitated. Then he reached out. His fingers wrapped around the bone grip. The moment his skin made contact, something tore through him, a surge of cold so intense it felt like fire. The emptiness inside him yawned open. Something poured into it, filling him, reshaping him, grinding him into something new. He screamed. The forest trembled. The figure stepped back, its jaw hanging loosely. The unmade becomes the awakened, it whispered. Arleth collapsed to his knees, clutching the staff. His breath came in harsh bursts. But inside his chest, the emptiness was gone. In its place burned a dark, steady core. Slowly, he rose to his feet. The figure began to fade, its form dissolving like smoke. Wait, Arleth gasped. What now? Its voice echoed through the trees. Now, Arleth, you decide what your new existence will demand. The last thing he heard before the skull dissolved into drifting ash and whom you will make pay. Arleth stood alone in the forest, but he was no longer hollow, no longer erased. He was something else entirely. And in the distance, Queen Brynhild felt the wind shift, cold, unnatural, carrying an echo she had never expected to hear again. An echo that should have died in the hollow. An echo rising from the unmade. The drums began at dusk. Slow at first, barely more than a pulse beneath the vast iron-colored sky, they vibrated to the timber walls of the war hall like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Everyone in Vair's camp knew what that meant. The night of the broken oath, the ceremony reserved for only the most treacherous betrayers, was about to begin. And tonight, for the first time in over a decade, a betrayer had been caught. Snow drifted across the courtyard as warriors tightened their cloaks and filed toward the Queen's Circle, the sacred clearing ringed with black standing stones. The air tasted of iron, pine resin, and the faint tang of smoke from the ever-burning pyres. They gathered without speaking. Some swallowed nervously. Others forced their faces into stillness. To witness the ceremony was an honor, yes, but it was also a lesson, a warning woven into ritual. No one knew the ceremony in full. Only Vair and the Four Keepers did. But every warrior in the tribe knew its reputation. It was a ceremony that made chieftains tremble. The ceremony that, according to legend, had once ended a rebellion before it even began, when Vair punished the conspirators in such a haunting, unforgettable way that survivors surrendered without a blade drawn. The ceremony that elders refused to describe to children. Tonight, the betrayer was a man many had once trusted. Haroun, son of Merrick, shield brother to dozens, veteran of 3 winters' worth of campaigns. A man who had shared tense meals and firesides with the very people he had tried to sell to the Empire. And now he stood at the center of the clearing, bound not with rope, but with braided strips of war bark, the kind used only in sacred rites. His hands were tied behind him, his knees pressed into the snow. His breath fogged the air in frantic bursts. He looked everywhere, at the crowd, at the stones, at the sky, except at the woman approaching from the far edge. Queen Vair did not hurry. She never had to. She walked slowly, deliberately, the wolf fur mantle trailing behind her, her braids heavy with bone and iron. The torchlight cast a sharp glow on her face, illuminating the cold lines of patience, strength, and ancient authority. In her left hand she held the oath stave, a carved and rune-marked length of rowan wood. In her right, she carried the bowl of telling, an object that had appeared only in whispers, carved from the skull of a long-dead king. When she finally stopped before Haroun, the drums ceased in an instant. The silence that followed was suffocating. Only the wind dared move. Vare looked down at Haroun, and for a long time neither spoke. Then she lifted the stave and placed it beneath his chin, forcing his gaze upward. "Haroun Merrickson," she said, voice steady and resonant, "you broke the oath sworn by your blood. You sold your tribe to an enemy who would have chained our children, burned our forests, and wiped our name from hills." Haroun's voice cracked. I did not mean—" Vare pressed the stave harder, cutting him off. "You meant it. You planned it. You carried the Empire's mark. And worse, you believed you would not be caught." Haroun swallowed, trembling. The queen lowered the stave and turned to the gathered warriors. "Tonight," she said, "we do not punish for vengeance. We do not punish for rage. We perform the rite of mirrors, so that the tribe remembers what betrayal truly looks like and how it is answered." A ripple of fear passed through the crowd. The rite of mirrors. Most had heard of it. Few had witnessed it. 2 apprentices stepped forward and placed the ceremonial mirrors, polished obsidian, each as tall as a man, around Haroun in a circle. The stones reflected torchlight strangely, casting warped and shifting patterns across the snow. Some said the mirrors showed not a person's face, but their spirit. Others whispered that they revealed one's true intentions. But tonight, they would reveal something else. Haroun's breathing turned frantic as the last mirror locked into place. "Please," he whispered, voice breaking. "Vare, I fought with you for years. I bled for this tribe. Let me explain." But the queen did not look at him. She motioned for the keepers. 4 hooded figures stepped forward, each holding a slender branch from the ash tree, the tree symbolizing truth, memory, and consequence. They dipped the branches into the bowl of telling, which was filled with a dark, shimmering liquid. The crowd leaned forward. Even seasoned warriors swallowed. Children who had tried to sneak into the circle were pulled back by anxious elders. The ceremony began. Vare raised the bowl and spoke. "Let the truth be shown." At her command, the keepers struck the obsidian mirrors with their branches. The mirrors did not crack. They screamed. A long, low wail vibrated out of the black stone, a sound that seemed to rise from the depths of the earth itself. The air trembled. Snow shifted. Warriors clenched their jaws as a strange resonance pulsed through their bones. Haroun flinched as if struck. The mirrors began to ripple like disturbed water. Then, within their glossy surfaces, shapes began to form. At first, faint outlines. Then clearer images, seen from Haroun's memories. The meeting with the imperial envoy. The hidden exchange of messages. The secret promises of land, wealth, power. The moment Haroun accepted the Empire's token. The moment he decided to betray the queen. The crowd whispered, horrified. Haroun sobbed, "No, stop, please." But the mirrors continued. They showed every moment of doubt, every attempt to justify himself, every instance where he could have walked away and chose not to. "You thought betrayal was a single act," Vare said quietly, "but betrayal is a path, and you walked it gladly." Haroun collapsed onto his side, unable to face the vision surrounding him. Tears streaked down his dirt-smeared face. The mirrors shifted again, revealing something else. What would have happened if Haroun had succeeded? Vare bound in chains. The tribe slaughtered. Children dragged away. The Empire's banners rising over the sacred hills. Now the crowd was silent, not out of fear, but out of cold, stunned realization. They saw what Haroun had almost allowed. They saw the cost. Even those who had once called him brother turned their faces away. The mirrors finally went still. The snow around them steamed in the bitter cold. Vare stepped forward and lifted the oath stave. "Haroun Merrickson," she said, "you're no longer this tribe. Your name will not be remembered among us. Your story ends tonight." Haroun closed his eyes. "And your lesson begins." She raised the stave, but instead of striking him, She struck the ground. The mirrors shattered, not into shards, but into black dust that scattered like ash in the wind. The sound was like a breath released after centuries. Haroun collapsed completely, unconscious. The ceremony was complete. The punishment was not execution. The punishment was erasure, to be forgotten, to be unmade, to be a man whose identity was carved out of memory. In their culture, exile was a fate worse than death. Warriors carried Haroun away, beyond the gates, toward the empty lands where his name would dissolve into cold. As the crowd dispersed, murmuring with shaken awe, the queen remained alone in the clearing. The wind tugged at her braids, and for the first time that night, she allowed her shoulders to sag, not from doubt, but from the immense weight of leadership. She had given the tribe the truth. She had protected them. But she had also seen what few ever saw. In the mirrors, for a brief instant, she had glimpsed not just Haroun's betrayal, but the shape of betrayals yet to come. The ceremony had revealed more than she expected, and tomorrow at dawn she would summon her generals, because the empire was closer than anyone realized. And this night, as twisted as it was, had only been the beginning. The morning after the night of the broken oath dawned gray and thin, as if the sky itself were exhausted by what it had witnessed. Frost still clung to the broken circle where the obsidian mirrors had dissolved into dust, and the air felt strangely hollow, like the world was holding its breath. Queen Vere stood alone at the edge of the clearing, staring at the faint scorch mark where her stave had struck the earth. She had not slept. Leaders rarely did after a night like that. Behind her, the camp stirred, warriors emerging from their tents, apprentices carrying water, hunters sharpening blades. But their voices were muted, their movements subdued. Even the wolves tied to the outer posts paced restlessly. The ceremony had changed the air. Everyone felt it. Vere turned when she heard footsteps crunching across the frost. It was Regan, her oldest general, built like a boar and just as stubborn. His thick beard was braided with tiny silver bands, each marking a campaign he had survived. "You should be resting," he said. Vere shook her head. "The Empire won't rest. Neither can we." Regan exhaled slowly. "I feared you'd say that." Together, they walked toward the war hall. The doors, carved with the tribe's history, grown open at their approach. Inside, the general circle waited. A low stone table surrounded by tall wooden chairs, each representing a bloodline of the tribe. All 5 seats were filled. Grim faces, tired eyes, and the unmistakable tension of people who knew bad news was coming. They rose as Vere entered. She took her place at the head of the table. "Sit," she ordered. They obeyed immediately. Regan folded his arms. "You saw something in the mirrors last night." The others stiffened. They knew their queen rarely revealed her private visions, unless the future demanded it. Vere placed both hands on the cold stone table. "I saw an imperial standard," she said. "Not in a memory, on our land. Their soldiers marching under winter banners. They are planning a northern push." General Isha, who commanded the scouts, leaned forward. "How soon?" Soon enough that Haroun's betrayal was not the first strike. It was merely preparation. Vere's voice sharpened. "The Empire never moves blindly. They bought themselves a guide to weaken us from inside. Now they will send their armies." A heavy silence settled over the room. It was General Bryn who finally broke it. "We can hold the east and west passes if we reinforce them. The Empire will not risk marching to the open plains. They'll take the narrow gorge by the Blackwater." "No," Vere shook her head. "The gorge would be the obvious route. The Empire is arrogant, but they are not fools. They will take the forest path." "The forest," Bryn scoffed. "No army can move through those woods in winter. They can if a traitor showed them the hidden routes." The table went still. Regan cursed under his breath. "Haroun." Vere nodded. The mirrors showed him leading an envoy through the old paths. "The Empire won't risk their generals, but they will send scouts first, small teams fast-moving to test the ground. Once they confirm the route, the invasion will follow." Isha's brow furrowed. "We can intercept the scouts, but the forest is vast. If even one slips past, the Empire will know." "Then none must slip past," Vere said. She lifted her chin. The generals knew what was coming. The time has come to awaken the wardens of the Frostfall. A murmur rippled around the table. Reagan frowned. They have not been summoned in a generation. Exactly, Ver replied. That is why they will be unexpected. The wardens were not warriors. They were hunters born of the old traditions, trained to navigate the frozen woods like shadows. Half-spirit in reputation, fully mortal in truth, they were the silent blades of the tribe, called only in times of deep threat. General Kayla, who rarely spoke, finally lifted her gaze. If we summon the wardens, we declare that we expect war. Ver fixed her with a steady stare. We do expect war. Bryn sighed. Then war will come. It already has, Ver said quietly. The generals exchanged grim nods, prepared to discuss strategy, but Ver raised a hand. There is something else. Something the mirrors show that I cannot ignore. This time, even Reagan looked uneasy. What did you see? He asked. Ver hesitated. Not because she doubted herself, but because she knew the weight of her next words. I saw our borders burning, she said. But I also saw a figure standing beside me in battle. Someone unknown. Someone who does not belong to our tribe, but who will decide its fate. The room shifted, as though the walls themselves leaned in. A stranger? Isha asked. Not a stranger. Ver's voice lowered. A return. The general stared. Return? Of who? Of what? Reagan spoke first. Your Majesty. That word has only one meaning in our lore. Ver nodded. A bloodline we believe lost. Kayla leaned back slowly, shock flickering across her features. You think someone survived the ruin of the Western Hill? No, Ver said. I know someone did. The room erupted in disbelief. That bloodline was wiped out generations ago. No one survived. The Empire burned that region. Ver slammed the oath, stave against the table, silencing them all. I saw it, she said. The mirrors do not lie. Reagan rubbed his temples. If someone from that bloodline lives, they would be heir to a power that has slept since the time of the first queen. Yes, Ver said softly, and the Empire may be seeking them as well. For a moment, no one spoke, because the implications were enormous. A lost bloodline returning at the moment of greatest threat. A stranger who might tip the balance of a war. A possibility the Empire would kill to prevent. Kayla broke the silence. Do you know who this person is? Ver shook her head. Only their silhouette. A figure wrapped in winter furs, carrying a blade with the mark of the Sunforge. Isha leaned forward. A weapon like that hasn't been made in a century. Exactly, Ver replied. Which means somewhere, someone has been preparing for this long, before we knew to fear it. And what do you intend to do? Bryn asked. Ver's gaze hardened. I intend to find them before the Empire does. Reagan exhaled deeply, already anticipating the battle this would spark. Then we will send scouts to the western valleys. No, Ver said firmly. I will go myself. The generals stared at her. You cannot, Bryn began. I am queen, she said. It is my duty. The wardens will secure the forest. You will fortify the passes. But if the stranger I saw is truly of the old bloodline, they will trust no one but me. Reagan clenched his jaw. Then at least take an escort. I will take one. Ver aloud. No more. We cannot risk drawing attention. Silence fell again. Heavy, reluctant acceptance settling in. Finally, Kayla rose to her feet and bowed her head. Then may the ancestors guide your path, Queen Ver. The others followed suit. Ver exhaled, letting the room fall quiet once more. She looked down at the oath stave, tracing one of its ancient runes with her thumb. The mirrors had shown her a future filled with fire and frost. But they had also shown her a chance, a slim thread of hope in the shape of a lone survivor. And she would follow that thread into the coldest parts of the world if she had to, because a storm was coming, and she would meet it head-on. The forest felt different the farther west Ver traveled. It was not just the thickness of the pines or the way the snow lay heavier on the branches here. It was the silence, the deep, almost reverent quiet of a place where ancient things had once lived and died, leaving their memories behind like fingerprints on the wind. Only one warrior traveled with her, Soren, the youngest of her personal guard. He was wiry and sharp-eyed, quick on his feet, and even quicker with questions he rarely voiced. His loyalty was absolute, and his silence was wise. Those were the two qualities Ver needed most. They moved at dawn, when the frost glowed silver on the trunks, and at dusk, when the sky blazed red like a warning. They kept the shadowed paths, away from open ground. Somewhere beyond the northern horizon, Imperial scouts were surely on the move, slipping between trees, searching for the hidden routes Haroon had revealed. And somewhere ahead was the figure Ver had seen in the mirrors, the survivor of a bloodline believed lost. If they reached that person late, the Empire would reach them first. By the third night, the forest had grown so quiet that Ver could hear the beat of her own heartbeat beneath the layers of fur. Even the wolves had stopped howling. That was when she found the tracks. They were faint but unmistakable, light, deliberate steps moving in a strange, swift pattern, almost like a dance. Whoever made them had passed recently. "Soren," she whispered, crouching beside them. "Do these look fresh to you?" His breath fogged as he knelt beside her. An hour at most, too light for an Imperial soldier. Ver brushed her fingers across the prints. They were shaped like human tracks, yet the spacing suggested someone unusually agile, someone trained to move without disturbing the snow more than necessary. Only hunters of rare talent could move this quietly, or someone raised in exile. She rose to her feet and signaled Soren forward. They followed the trail deeper into the pines. The forest thickened, the branches knitting overhead, until even moonlight became scarce. The cold bit harder here. Soren's hand hovered near the hilt of his blade, but Ver stayed relaxed. The presence she sensed was not hostile. Cautious, yes. Hidden, certainly. But not dangerous. Not yet. Hours passed before Ver finally stopped. She felt eyes watching her. Not from the front. From above. Slowly, she lifted her gaze to the branches. A figure crouched high in the pine tree, almost invisible against the dark bark. A shape wrapped in thick winter furs. Hood drawn low. Snow dusted their shoulders, and hair with a hood had fallen slightly back. Only their eyes were visible. Sharp, pale, unmistakably aware. The very same eyes she had seen in the mirrors. Ver exhaled slowly. "Climb down. I know who you are." The figure didn't move. Soren tensed, but Ver held up a hand. "I am not your enemy," she continued, "and I did not come to harm you." A long silence followed. Then the stranger dropped lightly from the branch, landing silently on the snow, so gracefully that Soren stiffened in surprise. The hooded figure straightened, and for a moment Ver finally took their full measure. Young, perhaps no more than 20 summers. A face shaped by hard winters and harder roads. A single braid over the shoulder, bound with a small ring of sun-forged metal. Not a myth, not a ghost, a survivor. "Who are you?" Soren asked, voice low. The stranger looked at him first, then at Ver. When they spoke, their voice was soft but steady. "I am Aaron of the Western Hill." Soren's expression faltered. "So the bloodline lives," Ver whispered. Aaron nodded once. "One of us does." For a moment, all three stood in the snow, breath hanging between them like mist. Then Aaron's gaze hardened. "Why did you seek me?" Ver stepped forward, letting the cold bite into her lungs before she spoke. "Because the Empire is coming," she said. "Because they know your blood carries something they fear, something they want to destroy. And because if they reach you first, everything we have fought to protect will vanish." Aaron's eyes flickered, but not with fear, with something sharper. Suspicion. "And why would your tribe protect me?" Aaron asked. "Your ancestors abandoned ours during the ruin. The Western Hill burned while your people watched." Soren stiffened, but Ver raised a hand to silence him. "That is true," she said, "and it is a stain we have never forgotten. But the mirrors showed me your face. They showed a future that does not happen unless you stand with us." Aaron's jaw tightened. "The mirrors showed you?" "Yes." "And what did they show exactly?" Ver met their gaze without blinking. "You standing beside me at the edge of our border," she said, "facing the Empire's vanguard, holding a blade that shines like the sun." Aaron said nothing. The forest seemed to hold its breath again. Finally, Aaron unfastened the strap across their chest and lifted the weapon slung over their back. It was wrapped in thick wool. Slowly, they pulled the cloth away. Soren inhaled sharply. Even Vair's breath caught. The blade was unmistakable. Bronze mixed with rare alloy, etched with sunburst runes only the artisans of the Western Hill had ever mastered. The edges glowed faintly, as if sunlight lingered within the metal itself. The last sun-forged sword in existence. Aaron looked down at it, their expression dark and unreadable. "This belonged to my mother," they said quietly. "She gave it to me the night our home fell. She said, 'One day, the world will need what we carry.'" Their fingers tightened around the hilt. I never believed her. Vair stepped closer, stopping a respectful distance away. "You were never meant to fight alone." Aaron's eyes met hers, full of turmoil, grief, and a strength carved from loss. Then the forest around them shifted. A branch snapped. Soren moved instantly, blade drawn. Imperial scouts. 3 figures slipped between the trees like shadows. Light armor, pale cloaks, short bows. Aaron spun, lifting the sun-forged blade with startling speed. The first scout didn't even fire before Soren reached him. The second loosed an arrow, but Aaron's blade flickered like a flash of dawn, slicing the shaft in half mid-flight. The scout stumbled back, stunned. The third drew a horn. Vair moved before he could raise it to his lips. The oath, stave struck the snow, sending a shockwave of frost that knocked the scout backward. The horn fell from his hands. Silence roared back through the forest. Soren checked the bodies, breath sharp in the cold. More will come. These were only the front sentries. Aaron lowered the sword, chest rising and falling. Vair met their gaze again. "Now you see why we came," she said. "The Empire knows you exist. They will not stop." Aaron looked at the fallen scouts, then at the blade glowing faintly in their grasp, then at Vair. And for the first time, something shifted in their expression. Resolve. "If I go with you," Aaron said slowly, "the Empire will follow." "If you stay here," Vair replied, "you will die alone, and the world will lose what your mother died to protect." The forest wind moved between them, cold but honest. Aaron sheathed the sun-forged blade. "I will come," they said. Soren exhaled in relief. Vair allowed herself a rare, quiet smile. "Then we leave before dawn," she said. "Our tribe prepares for war. And you are the final piece we need." Aaron nodded. And in the dim winter light, the 3 of them began the journey home, queen, warrior, and the last survivor in ancient bloodline, walking toward a future carved not by fear but by fire. A future in which the barbarian queen would stand against an empire. A future where a forgotten lineage would rise again. A future shaped by the twisted ceremony that had shown the truth, and by the unlikely alliance it sparked. The storm was coming, but together they would meet it. And history would remember this winter, not as a season of betrayal, but as the season of reckoning.